Happy 10th birthday, Saints Row 4. Time has truly flown with you. Today I wanted to talk about one of my all-time favourites. Saints Row 4 was a divisive game to say the least. It wasn't a bad game, but a lot of the old Saints Row fans were upset that the next mainline entry to a gang game was about aliens, which is definitely understandable.
Hope you don't mind.
Aliens.
What?
But since Saints Row 4 has finally hit a decade old, I just wanted to take a look back on the game and tell you why it means so much to me, even though it's a pretty obscure title in the series anyway. So, let's begin. Saints Row 4 was at one point my least favourite game in the series. In fact, I think around 2 years ago I said something like, somehow people think Saints Row 4 is their favourite. Safe to say I've done a lot of growth since then. I remember hating the game for its lame map, stupid story and all around goofy nature, which one could argue are all complaints that still hold up to this day. But as time passed and Saints Row evolved, I guess now I look back on Saints Row 4 with nostalgic, rose-tinted views. Many of my initial issues with the game have since become things I love about the game. I remember hating superpowers in Saints Row 4, but then having played the reboot, I learned how much fun it is to have a game execute the balls-to-the-wall side of Saints Row so well. I remember despising going against aliens and finding it really stupid. Then I looked deeper and learned to find Zinyak as a charismatic, well-played and rote antagonist. I just remember being so hypercritical of the game because when I first played it, I spent all the time going, this isn't Saints Row. But then I'd say around a year and a half ago, I tried to play it with a different mindset. I started to experience Saints Row 4 as a fun, action-packed, light-hearted send-off to the series. I learned to look into the development history and see why the game turned out the way it did, and how screwed the game's development was to the point I felt like we were lucky to get any Saints Row game at all. After playing Saints Row 2022, I realised the importance of likeable characters. How having characters the player can somewhat connect to is important. Saints Row 4 wasn't perfect when it came to its writing. A lot of players checked out of taking the franchise seriously at this point, which I get, but looking back at that cast lineup, it almost felt like a love letter to fans. Seeing Ben King return, going against Tanya, seeing Veteran Child, fighting Mero, getting to a point in the game where all the classic gangs from Saints Row 1 through 3 started to return and attack. I mean, the point I'm making here is that they at least very much tried to appeal to all players, both old and new in some elements. Steve Jaros, the lead writer and creative director of Saints Row 4, labelled the game as a love song to the fans. And while some may disagree with this statement, I'm not one of them. In fact, I think it's the perfect way to describe Saints Row 4. I feel like the way Saints Row 4 came out, it was just supposed to be a fun tribute to what once was. It almost felt like due to the conditions that Volition were under, they knew that this next part of the Saints Row chapter couldn't be a true follow-up to the previous ones. So instead of trying to build into the future, they almost felt like they had to end it. Maybe this was due to THQ or maybe not, but Saints Row 4 to me comes across as a farewell to the series at the time. Of course, Saints Row 4 wasn't perfect, it was clearly rushed, didn't fit the tone of Saints Row and obviously had quite a lot of faults. But at the same time, it could be considered one of the most diverse campaigns in the series. I mean, what campaign in Saints Row has you fighting aliens in Steelport, gangs in Stillwater, 2D side-scrollers, flying through an alien ship, watching the Earth blow up and more? It's so weird to me how a game that was under such huge time constraints and issues throughout development could somehow turn it so well and varied. You can call Saints Row 4 many things, but bland, it ain't one of them. I think it's super clear to see where priorities lied with Saints Row 4 though. Fun above everything. They fully prioritized fun and nostalgia over most things in the game. Customization? It's okay. Map? Same as 3. Gunplay? Basically the same as 3. The game doesn't innovate in areas you'd hope a sequel would, but it's because it goes fully left field being everything you expect a sequel not to be. Saints Row 4 stands on its own, in its own weird ways. During the build up for the reboot, I played nothing but the first 4 Saints Row games over and over. But unfortunately at the time I had no capture cards and only a PlayStation 4, so I was stuck streaming the only Saints Row I could, which was Saints Row Re-Elected, for practically months. Now after grinding and growing my channel with that game, it holds such a special place in my heart. Saints Row 4, you may not have been the best, but goddamn you were something special and unique. I mean, Saints Row 4 continued to up the levels for better or worse. I almost might say it's a tad bit underrated. If you can get past the fact it's not your traditional Saints Row game, you'll actually see, at least in my opinion, that the game itself isn't half bad. It's a really solid entry and perhaps for some of you let down by the reboot, give this game another shot. It's got a likeable cast, fun gameplay, a funny and awesome story, and the only truly major issue I have with it is that it's just really over the top. I can honestly say, having spent over 20 days playing the remaster of Saints Row 3, that I prefer 4, and it's one of those games I wish to God would just get a remaster. Don't get me wrong, I prefer 1 and 2, but man, I'd kill for them to consider at least a Saints Row 4 as well. Imagine Saints Row 4 with a remastered style of 3. Maybe it's just me being the weird Saints Row fan who likes everything they do, but I'd kill for that. Saints Row 4 for me truly ended the series on a high note, even if it took me a while to appreciate that. And now that it's over, I miss it. I miss the cast, I miss the OG series, and I miss what once was. Saints Row 4 is a farewell to Saints Row in the best way possible. I'm reflecting on it 10 years later, only makes that goodbye even harder. I fucking love this game.